conversations there, he was equally talking about the dissenting voices on matters to do with the budget, the collection, the new taxes that have equally been introduced. Kenyans earlier were also expressing themselves on the same, saying that the cost of doing business has gone high, that the government should look into the things, the facilities that they will be taxing, as well as how they will be able to move forward. Equally, how the government will be spending the money collected from Kenyans. Some saying that the government has not shown any remorse when it comes to spending this money. Everyone else is tightening the belt, but the government. That, as well as some sectors that have reaped big, as Muthoka has equally said. Remember, education has received over 600 billion shillings, and equally other sectors as well that have seen money taken from them. But all this is the conversation, the big conversation rather, will be how the government will be able to fund these budgets. New taxes have been introduced to Kenyans. Remember, the vehicle taxes that have been introduced, and Kenyans also having a lot to say with that. Also fuel and cooking products, those things that Kenyans use on a daily basis. But I want us to go to Treasury buildings and touch base with Noah Kipkemboy, who has been there the whole morning. Good afternoon to you, Noah. Earlier you were listening and enjoying yourself with the music, but now we are getting closer to the cabinet secretary walking out of those doors, making his way towards the National Assembly. Noah, what has changed from the last time we spoke? Are you still enjoying yourself? Is the music still tantalizing to your ears?
Well, good afternoon, Aseto. As you can tell from the pictures here is that we are somewhere in a boardroom. And when you're in a boardroom, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. You have to speak in low tones. And it's the same thing when we're experiencing the discussion around the finance bill 2024, because there are things that were being shouted, matters to do with the finance bill, of course, taxation of bread. There was the issue of motor vehicle tax, which is quite interesting. But underlying in low tones, there are recommendations within the finance bill 2024 that was actually, they are quite of concern, and that's why today we are here waiting to see this particular budget. So we are actually in a boardroom on the 14th floor of Treasury, and earlier on we spoke with the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njugunandung, who was quite interesting to talk to. I asked him one question because he's an economics professor. We were talking about the Laffer curve. Sometimes when you tax people too much, you end up collecting so little. And he told me he wrote that paper in 2001. I was asking myself, where was I in 2001? That is a story for another day. But there is that back and forth that we're saying the government is very committed to raising revenue, because they're saying we are between a rock and a hard place. What do we mean? Either we borrow or we finance from matters taxes, and they've said that we're going to taxes. So as it stands, we are here in the boardroom, in our boardroom behavior, Aseto. You see the way I'm calm. If I was down there, I would be moving around. But as it stands, I wanted you to show some pictures just to give you some history in regards to the cabinet secretaries and the ministers who've been part of this journey. What do I mean? All right. For starters, it was Mr. James Gishuru. Aseto, Mr. James Gishuru at the far end was the first Minister for Finance. Quite a character himself, Mr. James Stanley Gishuru. There is a time the president, the late president, first president, Jomo Kenyatta, was opening Central Bank, and Mr. James Gishuru was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he had actually delayed. But that's the history where we're coming from. After James Gishuru, we had our former president, the late Honorable Mwai Kibaki, who served between 1969 and 1981. This gentleman was an astute gentleman when it comes to economics, because even when he was president, is one of the periods that we experience a level of economic growth and balance between expenditure and also revenue raising. After him, we had shortly, on a short stint, we had from 1982 to 1988, Arthur Magugu, and there he is, and they're posing very nicely for these photos. Thereafter, we had the late George Saitoti from 1988 to 1992. Thereafter, our current Prime Cabinet Secretary. He was a young man, as you can see from that photo, a nice afro. The poise is at the right angle to the ground, 90 degrees. Honorable Messiah David, very painful, and there's been a lot of discussion in regards to whether that is the place that we are going. Is it history repeating itself? That is what happened between 1993 to 1997. Then thereafter we had Simeon Nyachai. After Simeon Nyachai, we had Honorable Chris Okemo, who was Minister for Finance between 1999 to 2001, and thereafter Chris Obure between 2001 and 2002. So that is just part of the history that we're experiencing here. And it's very critical even today as we await for the Cabinet Secretary to go and read the budget. The big discussion is the issue of funding the fiscal deficit as such. Fiscal deficit, which is of concern. Now it stands at 514.7 billion shillings. And we're expecting, actually the government expects to domestically borrow 257.9 billion shillings and external borrowing of 256.8 billion shillings. But even that as it may, even bigger challenge is the issue of something to do with debt, because national debt is of concern as settled. Now, when the PS Treasury, that is Dr. Kipto, was speaking to Parliament the other day on matters finance bill, he said that the national debt stands at 11.2 trillion shillings, and that is 70% of the GDP, which is of concern. And they're saying that if at all, this will be actually of huge concern as it stands, because I mean, 11.2 trillion shillings, that's a lot of debt that we have as a country. But I said, enough of my boardroom behavior and a little bit of history rather of our former ministers when it comes to finance. I'd like to hand it back to you, but we are keeping tabs because the Cabinet Secretary is expected to leave this floor. Actually, we're on the same floor with the office of the Cabinet Secretary. Now, he'll be leaving at around 2:30. There is a special lift that goes directly down to the ground floor. And once it lands on the ground floor, we'll be right there to welcome him and receive him on that budget pose that he takes at the entrance of Treasury. Thereafter, he heads to Parliament. And even that as it may, we are getting reactions from Kenyans. The occasion is not as auspicious as it used to be. Everyone is minding their own business. They're waiting, we read the budget, then we see what is pro and what is not pro-Kenya. But as it stands here at the 14th floor of the Treasury building, they say we are cruising nicely, but propositions within the finance bill, apparently, they aren't cruising nicely. Back to you, Aseto, in studio.
Noah Kipkemboi, the man who manages to adapt with situations. Now he is in his best behavior, in the boardroom behavior, as he says it. But we shall be touching base with him when the Cabinet Secretary will be descending down, making his way to the National Assembly. But now we equally go to the